If you've ever struggled using the built-in AirLink on the Quest, then you know that you are missing out on a lot of really good PC VR games, which is where the D-Link VR AirBridge might actually be the solution that you've been looking for. In this video, I'm going to talk about how it stacks up versus the built-in AirLink, as well as SteamVR. I'm going to talk about how it works, who this might be for, and a few extra numbers for you nerds out there that might be interested as well. So let's get into it. Okay, the first thing I want to talk about is how this works, because there's one big downside to this for me. So what the D-Link VR AirBridge does is that it creates a local network connection from your computer to the Quest, meaning that you are no longer connected to your Wi-Fi system. You are now directly connected to this. And because of that, you lose access to the outside world in terms of Wi-Fi. So if you have your phone connected and you're looking for notifications or something about that you want to be able to do something differently, that's going to suffer. This is basically an interface between your Quest and the computer. So if you want to do any of those things, you have to go back to your computer. As far as setting this up, it's actually really easy. The desktop app for Oculus, you set this up, you're going to have a few options once you plug it in. You'll see the VR AirBridge, and basically this is going to take over the AirBridge that's currently in place and just kind of switch that. So they've done a really good job of incorporating that. You'll then, of course, switch over to your headset. You'll connect to it through a Wi-Fi connection on there, and that's how that's going to work. It's really easy to set up, takes only a few minutes, so there's no real big tech problems that you're going to run into while getting this set up. Okay, so we know that the built-in AirLink has always struggled unless you had a good Wi-Fi system, but for most people, even if you had an above average one, it struggled. Well, this kind of solves those problems. Let's talk about how it compares. So right off the bat, I mean, this thing works flawlessly. I'm not going to give it any knocks. So if you don't have a good solution for using the AirLink, then this is definitely going to solve that problem. But the real thing is that I don't know what changes that they've made, but the AirLink has actually been improving over time to where I did test these out back and forth between my setup, and I have a pretty average setup for where I'm at in terms of my Wi-Fi and the distance. It did perform flawlessly. I had zero errors, where when I wanted to use the built-in AirLink, I always struggled. But that's where the other one came in, is that SteamVR always seemed to perform better than AirLink did. And so if you did have games on Steam, you could use the SteamVR and be able to stream games from your PC that way that had better performance on average for most users that tended to use that. So in playing those games, the connection that you have can determine the quality that you're getting of that game because it's streaming to your headset. And SteamVR has always performed admirably, I'd say almost perfectly most of the time, but it does struggle in certain instances. As far as the VR AirBridge, I tried this on several games that were very intensive in terms of graphics and network usage, and that one held up without a hiccup. So I gotta say that if you are looking for something that works there and you're comparing it there, however, for a lot of you that don't have many problems on SteamVR, it is a pretty hefty price tag, so you might just want to stick with what's there. It is kind of a luxury item if you don't really need it, but if you need it, this thing does work perfectly. And this leads me to one really big point when it comes to numbers. So for those of you that love the numbers and working on the back end, you know that there's going to be all kinds of things that you can use to change resolution, up the refresh rate, or do things like your encoding rate. Well, I decided to test that because in AirLink, you can actually take this up to 200. By default, this is lower. So in the built-in one, I was able to get the full 200 megabits per second and get the full capability out of that. That's one big plus for me, is that worked perfectly. Now, I decided I'd go in on the back end and try it a little bit more. There's a lot of hope that this was going to push it to another limit, be able to get more so that you get better quality video when it is streaming. I pushed this to 300, 250. I could not get a solid signal. I topped out at about 220, meaning about a 10% increase in performance versus AirLink versus the D-Link VR in terms of that maximum 200 that you're looking for. So I was a little disappointed that I couldn't squeeze out any more than that, despite it being right next to me and there. Maybe I'm missing out on something there, but I did want to go in and test that back, and especially for those of you that are looking for that higher quality, like I know I was, and hoping that this would be the solution. It didn't live up to the hype that I think a lot of us built on that. So that does fall short in terms of exceeding expectations, but it does do what it's supposed to do. So in conclusion, is this worth it? If you aren't able to play PC VR games at all, especially if you're trying to do it wirelessly, this is a great solution. If you're trying to untether, which most of us are, and that's the reason we have the Quest 2, this definitely gets the job done. It works perfectly. You can bump up that bit rate to the maximum amount within the system, and you're going to get really good quality video. We'll just wait until we can get a faster bit rate, maybe in the future, but right now this does do the job, and the D-Link VR AirBridge might just be what you're looking for.